There are places in this world that feel ancient, places best left undisturbed, mountains that hold dark secrets, and an even older hunger. Locals have names for these places, whispered with a mix of fear and respect. Vanishing on a mountain isn't just a myth or a legend. For some, it's terrifyingly real. In Zimbabwe, there's a peak the Manica people know as Mount Nyong'ani. For generations, they've told stories of those who walked its slopes and were never seen again. No remains, no gear, nothing. It's earned a chilling nickname, the mountain that swallows people. Thousands of miles away, on a different continent, stands another such peak. The people who live in its shadow have a different name for it, but the meaning is the same. They call it the Swallower. This is the story of one hiker who ignored the warnings and found out why. Alex considered himself a seasoned hiker. He wasn't a professional mountaineer, but he'd bagged more than a few challenging summits. He was methodical, maybe a little arrogant, and believed that with enough preparation he could handle anything nature threw at him. When he rolled into the sleepy town at the mountain's base, he was looking for a challenge, not a ghost story. The first warning came from the proprietor of the local gear shop, a man whose face was a roadmap of wrinkles carved by decades of mountain sun. "You heading up the Swallower, son?" he asked, his eyes landing on the brand new GPS unit Alex set on the counter. "This is different," the old man pressed, his voice dropping. "People go up, and they don't come down. No trace. It's been happening for as long as anyone can remember. Reminds me of the stories from Nyong'ani back in Africa. A government minister's daughter vanished up there in the 80s. They brought in helicopters, massive search parties, never found a thing." Alex just clapped the man on the shoulder. "Don't you worry, I've got the best gear money can buy. I'll be down before sunset, I promise." He walked out of the store, the old man's warning hanging in the air like a bad omen. Alex was a man of science and logic, of maps and coordinates. He had no time for vengeful spirits or hungry mountains. It was a mistake he'd regret for the rest of his life. The day started perfectly, just as Alex had planned. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, the air was crisp, and the trail was tough but rewarding. He felt that familiar surge of adrenaline, the thrill of conquering a new peak. He even thought of the old man in the shop and smiled to himself. Hungry mountain. What nonsense. Around midday, he reached a false summit. The view was already breathtaking, a sprawling panorama of forested valleys and distant, hazy peaks. He stopped for a quick lunch and to check his position. Everything was on schedule. He pushed on, aiming for the true summit, maybe another hour above him. That's when things changed. It wasn't a gradual shift in the weather. It was abrupt, unnatural. A thick, white fog began to pour over the ridge above, not rolling in, but dropping like a blanket thrown from the sky. In Spain, there are tales of a similar fog on La Musara mountain, a strange, thick mist that appears from nowhere and is said to swallow people whole. One moment, Alex was in sunlight, the next, he was lost in a dense, silent cloud. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet, a total whiteout. His first reaction was annoyance. This wasn't in the forecast. He pulled out his compass, then his GPS, figuring he'd just wait it out or navigate his way back down. But the compass needle was spinning lazily, useless. His GPS screen flickered and died, no satellite signal. A knot of real unease tightened in his stomach. This felt like more than just freak weather. He shouted, but his voice sounded muffled, swallowed by the fog. The only reply was the frantic drumming of his own heart. Then came the silence, a profound, oppressive quiet he'd never experienced in the wild before. No birds, no insects, not even the rustle of leaves. It was a silence so complete it felt like a presence in itself. He decided to backtrack, trying to carefully retrace his steps. After 10 minutes of tense, deliberate walking, he should have been heading downhill. Instead, he found himself standing in a small, unfamiliar clearing. In the center was a patch of ground littered with the bodies of a dozen small birds. They lay on the pine needles, wings folded, with no sign of injury. as if they had all just dropped from the sky at the exact same moment. Panic, cold and sharp, finally cut through his arrogance. The old man's words echoed in his head. "It takes them. No trace." The feeling of being truly lost began to warp his thinking, that creeping dread that told him he wasn't just a hiker who had lost his way. He was prey. The world became a disorienting maze of gray fog and dark, imposing trees. Time seemed to melt away. It could have been minutes or hours. He felt a deep, crushing isolation, the kind that can break even the most experienced outdoorsman. Then he heard it, a whisper. It was faint at first, like wind sighing through branches. But there was no wind. It grew clearer, coalescing into a single, chilling sound. His own name. "Alex!" He spun around, heart hammering against his ribs. "Who's there?" he yelled, his voice cracking. The whisper came again, this time from a different direction, seeming to come from everywhere at once. It was a beckoning sound, pulling him deeper into the woods, just like in the old, terrifying stories. He fought the urge to follow it, planting his feet, trying to choke down the panic clawing at his throat. He remembered a story about a man lost on Nyong'ani who could see his rescuers but found himself unable to call out, as if trapped in another world. He stumbled onward, forcing himself downhill, knowing it was his only chance. The terrain grew more treacherous. He felt eyes on him, a palpable sense of being watched by something intelligent and malevolent. It wasn't in his head, it was a pressure against his skin, a cold weight in the air. The mountain wasn't just a place. It was alive, and it knew he was there. Through a momentary thinning of the fog, he saw it. Standing between two ancient, gnarled trees was a figure. It was tall and vaguely human-shaped, but its proportions were all wrong. It had no face, just a smooth, blank surface where features should have been. The sight was so fundamentally wrong, so far outside the bounds of reality, that Alex's mind just refused to process it for a second. The faceless thing didn't move. It just stood there, watching him. And in that silent gaze, Alex felt a bottomless hunger, a possessive energy that wanted to swallow him whole, to add him to its collection of the lost. This was the swallower. This was what the old man had warned him about. It didn't need to chase him. It knew the fog, the disorientation, and the pure terror would do its work. It was the perfect predator. Something inside Alex just broke. The layers of logic, experience, and arrogance were stripped away, leaving only the raw animal instinct to survive. He didn't scream. The sound was trapped in his throat. He just turned and ran. He abandoned all sense of direction. He scrambled, fell, and picked himself up, fueled by a terror so pure it was its own kind of energy. He slid down moss-slicked rocks, tore through thorny bushes, and plunged through icy streams, his only thought to put distance between himself and that silent, faceless horror. He was just running, hoping any path would lead somewhere safe. The whispers followed, taunting him, but he refused to listen. The image of that creature burned into his mind. He ran until his lungs were on fire and his legs screamed in protest, until his body was a mess of cuts and bruises. He had no idea how long he'd been running. The fog was still thick, a ghostly shroud that wouldn't let up. Just as he felt his strength finally give out, he burst through a curtain of trees and tumbled onto something hard and gritty. Asphalt. He had stumbled onto a road, miles from where he'd started, on a completely different side of the mountain. He lay there, gasping for air, and looked back. The fog line was a solid, stationary wall just a few feet into the woods, as if marking a boundary. The forest beyond it was dark and completely silent. The swallower had let him go. A car eventually found him, a disheveled, shivering, incoherent wreck. He tried to explain what happened, the fog, the silence, the figure, but the words came out as a jumbled mess. They chalked it up to hypothermia and panic, the kind of woods shock that can hit anyone who gets lost. They couldn't understand. They couldn't know that being lost was only the beginning of the horror. Alex survived, but the man who came down from the mountain wasn't the same one who went up. He never hiked again. He developed a crippling fear of open spaces, and sometimes in the dead of night he still hears it, a faint, taunting whisper in the wind, calling his name. He knows, with a certainty that chills him to his soul, that there are places in this world that are ancient, awake, and hungry. And the swallower is still there, shrouded in its unnatural fog, waiting patiently for the next person who dares to ignore the warnings. The line between a survival story and a horror story can be incredibly thin. Sometimes it comes down to a simple, terrifying question: what if you weren't just lost? What if you were being hunted by something that defies all explanation? Many mountains around the world have these dark legends, and an unsettling number of unsolved disappearances to back them up.